Thank you, James. Up next, Professor Amanda Burgess, Women and Gender Studies here at the University of Windsor. Women's rights, food for thought, or just plain food. The future for women in a zombie apocalypse. Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay, well, thank you. I've taught for the Department of Political Science, the Faculty of Law, and in recent few years for the Department of Women's Studies, Windsor Women and Gender Studies. So I think all of my interests sort of come out in this presentation, and don't worry, it's a lot of photos. I guess I got captured by The Walking Dead and some of the themes from The Walking Dead very early. This is a scene from the third episode called Tell It to the Frogs. The world ended, didn't you get the memo? And again, it's this idea of what were the women doing, how have they been portrayed? And one of the things most, I suppose, about The Walking Dead, and is most of my focus on this, because we've now had 6 seasons, we've just started the 7th. There's a lot of episodes to draw on, much more than, say, a motion picture, where in most of the zombie movies, the apocalypse has just happened. They're just trying to survive the weekend, survive a day. But The Walking Dead has shown us what happens in years afterwards and what's going on, because time is starting to pass. And we've seen the characters evolve over the 6 seasons and now into the 7th. I'll also say at the beginning that I haven't read the comic or the graphic novels. I'm just a TV watcher. I'm also one of those fanatic TV watchers that, you know, whenever there's a new season and they do all the previous episodes, even though I've got all the DVDs and I've got it on my PVR, I still have to watch it. And I can't go out for groceries because this is a good episode coming up, even though I've seen it 15 times. So how are the women treated? How do women participate? These are the sorts of things I'm looking at, the backstories, the character development. A little bit on women's rights. And one of my first questions to ask you is, if you're thinking about women's rights, and women's rights today, no zombie apocalypse, when you just think about the term and you hear about women's rights, what kind of things are you thinking about? Like, how would we define it before the apocalypse hits? What kind of things are we concerned about? Anybody want to jump out with an answer? Pay equity, yay, okay. Okay, well, I assume people are kind of quiet and shy, so I answered for you anyway. I'm good at that. Suffrage, equal pay, glass ceiling, and all of these things that are sort of listed there. How many of these would we be worrying about if it was a zombie apocalypse? If there are swarms of zombies, do we really care whether we're being paid? Is anybody paying us? Is there a glass ceiling anymore? Or, violence against women, that is a theme that's going to come up throughout my discussion in the next few minutes. And again, the zombie apocalypse is that metaphor for any kind of disaster, and I've loved disaster movies all my life. There was a mention earlier this morning about the book Lucifer's Hammer. That's one of my go-tos when I'm in a bad mood. If anybody wants the authors, Lucifer's Hammer is a great one. Again, that's like a meteor strike, and again, the world's sort of pretty much been destroyed, and what do the survivors do? So whether it's an alien invasion, because Falling Skies, if anybody watched Falling Skies, that was 2011 to 2015, so it very much sort of paralleled The Walking Dead, and really I think one of the biggest parallels I found between the two was the level of sort of guns and violence. But again, it was the same sort of thing. There was some sort of apocalyptic event, alien invasion, and how did the characters get past it? So again, women's rights during a zombie apocalypse, as I've said, I think a lot of the things that we think of today as being women's rights are really gone. So we have to sort of redefine women's rights now in the zombie apocalypse. So again, this is a bit of a limited discussion because we really are only watching our group, which is in the United States, Atlanta, and they've been moving up to Virginia. We don't know anything about what's happening in other parts of the world, like what's happening in England, what's happening in India. So it's very much a North American perspective, and in many ways we're back to the Dark Ages, because certainly the story of Laurie and her pregnancy and her brutal end, pregnancy is not a good thing, which again doesn't bode well for the human race as time goes on. We now have another pregnancy that we're following with our group with Maggie, also not going so well right now. Not that I want to give spoilers away. So present day with our zombie apocalypse, the rules have changed, or have they? This was another little discussion from season 1, episode 4, called Los Vatos, when they met up with the gang that was taking care of the elderly people in the nursing home. T-Dog at one point says, I guess the world's changed, and Guillermo says, no, it's the same as it ever was, the weak get taken. And if that's not sort of foreshadowing the next few seasons and what's been going on, it's very much a who's got power and who's got control. So I just have some shows for the zombie movie genre, and as I've said, most of them are lacking in that sort of character development, just because they're limited by 90 or 120 minutes and they're just trying to survive a weekend. We have had the luxury with The Walking Dead to really play out with the characters. So patriarchy, one of those lovely terms that always comes up in women's studies and women's rights. Has there been a paradigm shift in our zombie apocalypse? What's happened to our assumptions about gender roles, limitations perhaps we put on ourselves? Have they all been magically erased with this paradigm shift? In season 1, again, back to that sort of first slide where you saw the women doing the laundry, you very much saw the female characters, Laurie and Carol in particular. There was never any mention that they had any kind of careers other than stay-at-home wives and moms. And yes, they were doing the laundry. There was a lot of chopping of vegetables when they got to the farm in season 2. You often saw them sitting around chopping carrots a lot. And hanging up laundry. So again, the women have fallen back to more traditional roles. Andrea was a constitutional lawyer. It had told us at one point, Ed, Carol's husband, who I loved his demise, he called her, I believe, an uppity bitch at one point. Jackie, who also ended up, she only got through the first season, the 6-episode first season. Jackie said she'd worked in a zoning department. Other than that, we are not getting a lot of sort of career backgrounds. I'd also say that, we also don't start clean. Even though there's been a zombie apocalypse, there's not sort of a sudden reset. We come into the zombie apocalypse with our backgrounds, with our characteristics, with all of our prejudices and assumptions, our expectations, all of our experience, and yet we're thrown into this new world and we all react in a different way. Some of our characters have had the luxury to live long enough to transform themselves along the way. There was a lot of patronizing bits that went on in the first couple seasons. Dale liked Amy and Andrea. Of course, Amy got bumped off fast, but he was in many ways very patronizing. The whole thing with Andrea had the gun but she didn't know how to take the safety off. Did they show her how to take the safety off? Not really. They took it away from her until she was sort of ready. How do you get ready to use the gun if you don't have the freaking gun? It's very kind of patronizing. So that was Andrea trying to clean the gun. There was another one. Remember when they were at the CDC and they finally got the door unlocked, but then they couldn't shoot their way out, and the bomb's going to go off any second. Time's running out. Carol says, Rick, I've got something that might help, because they've tried shooting the windows. They're bulletproof, can't break out. And Shane says, Carol, I don't think a nail file's going to do it. I mean, if that's not a patronizing line, and what does she pull out? She pulled out a hand grenade that is ultimately what saved them. So, I mean, Carol she was a very weak character at the start, but she still pulled out that hand grenade that did save them in the end of season 2. A little bit more patronizing, this was let's see, season 3, episode 13. Andrea was the one who sort of brokered the debate between the governor and Rick. Although, if you remember, although she brought them together, they weren't going to talk in front of her, and she was extremely annoyed when she kind of got sent out. And in fact, she didn't really know which group she belonged with. Herschel, a little bit patronizing, said, oh, you always belong with us, which sounds nice, but it just seemed a little patronizing. So who's going to survive? The human race is not going to survive, as we've just heard, if there aren't any women, if there aren't any children. And granted, this is not something really our group has been worrying about. I've also noted that a zombie doesn't really care who he eats, male or female. There was one line about Bob tasting better. That was the cannibals, not a zombie, but there was that line about Bob tasted better than they expected he was going to. I don't know if that's some sort of weird racist line, but so they're trying to get back to normal. At some point, I guess they're realizing they're not going to ever get back to normal. They need to maybe try something better. We've had the farm, which initially seemed like a nice, safe place. Of course, that didn't end well. The prison, again, the irony of a prison being a safe place, like having bars actually keeps you safe. Woodbury looked nice, but again had that dark underbelly. Now we've moved on to Alexandria, and I could go on about the sort of whole genre of the suburban dystopia. Again, because it looks like a nice suburban setting, and again, how safe is that too? Adaptation. Some characters adapted. Jackie, again, she decided to stay in the CDC and get blown up. She obviously couldn't adapt to the world she was living in. And I love, too, that Dale, again, fought for Andrea to leave, but nobody seemed to be arguing for Jackie to get out of there. They were quite happy that she stayed behind and got blown up, which kind of bothers me a tad. Beth in season 2 had tried to kill herself at one point. Now again, her character did adapt, but even at that didn't end well. And we'll talk about who's made it out and who hasn't. The state of nature, because you got to bring in Hobbs at some point. I've got the shot of the farm and then bodies being buried at the farm. Yeah, life definitely is nasty, short, and brutish. A little bit about politics, and we've seen different types of politics and different types of leadership where we're sort of having a consensus on how things should be, to Rick saying this isn't a democracy. There was a council at one point. Again, when things are going fairly well, they seem to be a little more democratic. When things are falling to pieces, you want somebody to be making decisions fast. I guess that's the quick. So what do the survivors want? Safety, freedom, a home. I'm sort of questioning power and control. Are they the same sort of thing? Again, I've said we don't start clean. What would women want? Are women going to want anything different? I mean, ultimately, I suppose it's a voice, it's participation in decisions that are being made, it's being equal partners in decision making. I've got a few slides about violence. Again, there's the constant threat from zombies, but as time has gone on, the threat from other survivors has become almost the bigger threat to the survival of our groups. Are women just bolstering numbers? I think in many ways the governor saw women and children. Remember when he was trying to get a head count, so they had more numbers. I don't think Rick's group has ever counted things that way. And again, as we get to some of the other groups we've seen along the way, there's been a predominance of male-only groups. Like think of Joe's groups, the Claimers, that was all men. And I mean, if I was hiding behind a bush and I saw them coming down the road, I would not have been announcing myself. They were a scary darn group. That's when I keep thinking, in an apocalypse, I think I might just close my door and stay in my house for a while. Female stereotypes, again, at the beginning in season 1 and season 2, I wondered what kind of stereotypes we'd see. We kind of had the mother and the good wife. Of course, we have to have the love triangle, which annoyed the heck out of me too. And I think in many ways, even when they got rid of Shane and Lori had committed to Rick, it was such a half-hearted commitment. I mean, she was supposed to be supportive, but she sort of supported him by looking at him quizzically half the time, like, oh, I'll do whatever you say, I'll support whatever decision, and then she sort of half-heartedly supports him. Again, Lori went about as far as she could go. I'm not surprised that they killed her off. I know. There was a great conversation. I just want to get to this one too. Oops, I went too far. Remember Lori and Andrea, Lori, and this is in the farm, Lori's a little peeved that Andrea seems to be with the guys all the time. She's learning to shoot, she's figured out what the safety is at this point. So she's doing a lot of the shooting, a lot of the protecting of the group, what has turned into these sort of male roles. And Lori's going, there's a lot of work to do around here. And she's meaning the cooking and the cleaning, the laundry. And Andrea's not pulling her weight. It's like, in Lori's mind, there are women's roles and men's roles. I found, this one drives me freaking crazy too. This is from the Hollywood Reporter, and the quote's on the next slide, but this is Kirkman, who of course created the comic and is one of the executive producers. He said, Lori's really just aggravated over a lot of things. She's lashing out. There are certain people, certain gender tasks that are getting stuck, traditional gender roles. Lori has a lot of things going on. I mean, yeah, because she's torn between Rick and Shane, and she's pregnant. She's got to cope with pregnancy. Oh, yeah, she's got to cope with it. And this conflict. She's going through a lot of stuff. If that's not a male way, when you think that he's an executive producer and wrote the comic, that just annoys me in so many ways. But anyway, I should get past that. So ultimately, that's a terrible picture, but Lori paid the price. World War Z, just to go to a different one for a moment, it started off really great for those who've seen it. I thought that the husband and wife really seemed to go back and forth with the care of the kids. The first part, it's almost like there are 3 parts to the movie, but in that very first part, they really had a good relationship as spouses and caregivers of the kids. But then as the movie progresses, Jerry's the one who goes off on the mission, and all she does is stay behind with the kids and worry, and of course flick the walkie-talkie at bad moments to put everybody's life in danger. A little bit from Fear the Walking Dead. I wish I could warm up to Madison. I kind of like her, but kind of don't. She's a ferocious mother, but there's something really cold about her. This was another annoying one for me. This was Carol talking to Andrea about the governor. Again, it's that use of sex. Get him to drop his guard. Give him the best night of his life, then kill him, which, of course, Andrea screwed up, so to speak. She doesn't quite kill him. Again, she thinks she can still talk her way out of this. But again, there's been a little bit of domestic violence. Carol at the start, again, part of her character. Jesse, domestic violence. That's Daryl's back. It's hard to see, but again, he was getting violence from his father. The threat of rape. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, Rape is Punishment. That was Michonne and Carl with the Claimers. There was also rape that had gone on. That's what had started the group at Terminus. Again, it apparently was a safe destination at one point until a group came, multiple rapes of the women there, and that's when they decided you're either the butcher or the cattle. Carol's progression, again, what a wonderful character. We've seen her go from absolutely meek to being able to not only take care of herself, but to take care of others, training the kids on how to defend themselves when they were still at the prison. And I also like that she's, used her, perhaps her old nature almost as a disguise. Like when she first got to Alexandria, she played as if she was sort of helpless in the den mother type. And again, when we got to I love Cookie Monster, Look at the Flowers. Let me skip for a second. Oops. That was such a great episode. Another annoying thing, I saw several sites that called that a feminist episode, and their main reason for why that was a feminist episode was because 5 of the 6 characters were female. That makes it a feminist episode. I mean, it was a really good episode, but that shouldn't be the reason why it's a strong feminist episode. But it was interesting, the parallels and how women have survived in different groups, which we haven't seen too much. There's a little bit I had about 2 other female leaders, Dawn, who seemed to be holding on by the skin of her teeth at Grady Memorial, and then Alexandria. Deanna was an interesting character. Yes, she was a leader, but they were sort of so protected with their walls. It's very interesting that they needed Rick's group because they realized the walls weren't going to sustain them forever. But it's kind of funny about how quickly after Rick's group came, everybody freaking got killed in Alexandria. I mean, we saw families wiped out. So, I mean, there's a lot. The women, and the other nice thing about the previous bit is that Carol and Maggie didn't wait to be saved. Yes, Rick's group was on the walkie-talkie and trying to save them, but Maggie and Carol saved themselves in that episode, which I do like, and that's just our conclusion. It's ironic that for women to be treated or portrayed as equals, we almost need to create this scenario where life as we know it has been erased. So, there you go.